Hey folks, time to take a look at the biggest, baddest hardware upgrade the TI-99 ever got. The Peripheral Expansion Box. A 30-pound monster that adds all the features a TI-99 needs to be a really complete, capable 80s computer. Before 1982 brought the PEB into the picture, TI Expansion looked pretty different. Since back when the TI-99-4 debuted in 1979, all TI peripheral hardware was sold as sidecars that connected to your TI computer via the right side expansion port. Which worked alright as solutions go, at least at first. Because on the surface, a sidecars for everything expansion solution is a pretty user-friendly solution, where anything you need plugs right into the side of your computer. It's just that in the long run, a sidecars for everything solution starts to get pretty impractical pretty quick, as sidecars multiply and so do your space requirements. If you're going for all the bells and whistles, well, making every single feature its own device with its own case and its own PSU and its own connection to mains AC, that's just kind of crazy. Now, if all I want's RS-232, yeah, a sidecar's fine. And if all I want's disk support, a sidecar's maybe fine for that too. And if all I want's memory expansion, sure, a sidecar's fine there as well. The problem is, if I want all those things, and a couple more things besides probably, at that point, things just get ridiculous, and we definitely need something more practical. Well, thanks to the Peripheral Expansion Box, 99ers did get something more practical, and we didn't get stuck with sidecar insanity forever. Because by the time the 99-4A came around, TI had bought into the idea of a dedicated box for peripheral cards, and they were happy to sell users on the concept, with the PEB being promoted right on the packaging of the 99-4A. Easy to use, versatile, expandable. The Peripheral Expansion System can conveniently enclose expanded memory, disk storage, communications interfaces, and additional programming languages, without extra cables and clutter. You can build more sophisticated home computer systems by plugging expansion hardware into the single Peripheral Expansion System box. So as you can see there, TI's branding for their solution is the Peripheral Expansion System. That's what it says on the manual, and that's what it says on the box. But that's not what the TI community calls it, and that's not what I've been calling it here either. To the TI community, it's the PEB, or the PEB, or the P-box, or the PE box, or, well, I guess even the Peripheral Expansion Box, if you just don't like acronyms. But in defense of my having called it both the PEB and the PEB, seemingly at random, and in defense of this confusion about what it's called, even TI seemed a little uncertain about what they were calling it. One model of PEB brands itself the Texas Instruments Expansion System, with that PEB design featuring a rocker power switch as you can see there. And the other one calls itself the Texas Instruments 99-4 Peripheral Expansion System. And that one has a push-button power switch, as you can see there. Both models came out after the 99-4A had been released and replaced the 99-4. So the branding was a little behind the times at release. Now exclusively for your 99-4A, the 99-4 Peripheral Expansion System. What? Though in its defense, the PEB isn't alone in getting stuck with out-of-date 99-4 branding. Extended Basic has 99-4 branding all over it, despite coming out after the 4A likewise. Probably in TI's ideal timeline without any of the delays that held up these products, and they held them up. Both XP and the PEB would have been 99-4 era options. But that isn't how it played out, so the branding's a bit out of sync. Regardless, you can see in either version of the PEB, it features that classic silver and black color scheme we got with the 99-4, and with the original 4A. So it looks pretty snappy with either the 99-4 or 4A. Later in the 99-4A's life, TI did switch to a beige color scheme for the machine, and there is at least one surviving promotional image of a beige PEB, painted to match the beige 4A. But as far as we know, beige PEBs never made it into production. And that's probably for the best. I've never been able to sell myself on the beige 4A. Both of the PEBs behind me right now being silver and black suits me just fine, standing proudly as they are between a silver and black 99.4 and a silver and black 4A. Speaking of which, another thing you might notice about those PEBs is they're standing vertically, which is a perfectly reasonable way to have your PEBs positioned if that works best for you. Just worth keeping in mind that the feet on the PEB are on the wide edge. So if you want the PEB to actually have anything to stand on vertically, other than a couple of case screws, well, you'll have to add some feet of your own on that side. Anyway, enough about the outside of the PEB. Let's open it up and look inside. And the way we do that is by pressing on two clips at the back of the case, which will pop open the lid and let me lift it off. No tools required. Though the clips on this one are just a little bent, so not quite as easy as it should be. Inside the PEB we've got 8 slots, but the first slot is dedicated to the flex cable interface, which is our connection to the TI-99 itself. Folks tend to call this the fire hose on account of the big, heavy, shielded cable, the other end of which plugs into the expansion port of the TI-99. Now, I'll admit, the fire hose is kind of huge and awkward. But the way I see it, anytime we feel like complaining about the heavy build on TI hardware, we probably ought to keep in mind we're using a computer 40 years after it left the market. So, we should probably be thankful for whatever durability we got. But back inside the PEB, the other special purpose slot in there is slot 8, which is usually going to be home to your disk controller. Reason for that being, with the TI disk controller in slot 8, your internal floppy connector points directly into the floppy bay, to provide your connection there. The TI disk controller's other connector sits outside the case, and lets you hook up an external drive there if you like, which might look kind of odd if you're used to more modern solutions. Most PEB card connectors being just a part of the board that's outside the case. But that's how the PEB does it. And honestly, it keeps things simple for developers. No proprietary mounting brackets to worry about, just a part of the board that pokes outside the case for access to any connectors there. Though in the case of the disk controller, I'd say most folks just stick with internal drives, often going with a 2-disk setup using half-height drives. Since some programs, like Multiplan, do really like to have more than one drive in your TI. The only challenge presented by the 2-drive setup being you've only got mounting holes for one full-height drive. So you're going to have to provide your own drive mounting solution. The TI-99 being a 1979 computer, TI's own floppy controller and drive were a single-sided, single-density setup, which means 90K per disk. So, on the one hand, that's not a lot of disk. But, on the other hand, in a 16K TI world, where programs can really only be 13K and still fit in a memory, well, 90K is enough for just about anything. It's enough to store a whole pile of custom Tunnels of Doom scenarios on disk, and enough for a ton of new adventures for your adventure module. It's probably plenty of space for all your spreadsheets, and it's big enough for any 16K basic game. But probably, if you've got a PEB, you're not just going to settle for 16K basic software and all the memory limitations of the stock console, because that would be crazy. So, if you aren't crazy, you're going to want the second must-have card in any PEB, the 32K memory expansion. Because with the 32K memory expansion, the TI-99 world really opens up, since now you can load all the best disc games the TI-99 has to offer. In Extended Basic, you can discover the world of Legends 2. And you can explore the halls of Carfax Abbey. Then, in Pure Assembly, even more amazing things are on offer, like Warzone 2 with its vertical scrolling shooter action. Together, the 32K expansion and disk controller really transform the TI-99 into a more complete, more capable 80s computer. They really are the cornerstone of what a TI-99 ought to be. But as important as those are, what the PEB has to offer doesn't begin and end with them. After those two upgrades, the card you'll see in most PEBs is the Tirs232 card, with that being used for printing and for any kind of serial communication you might need. Now you probably won't be using RS-232 to connect your acoustic coupler these days, but you still might use RS-232 to connect just about anything else. Because as a way to send data to and from other hardware, RS-232 is really handy and really well supported. The most fun I've had with TI-RS-232 was turning a TI-99 into a power and AV administration console for all my favorite game systems, with power management, picture tweaking, signal selection, and picture-in-picture preview, all handled and controlled via TI-RS-232 from my TI-99 keyboard. But you don't need to get that wacky. You don't need to automate every device you own for TI-RS-232 to have some use. Having a well-supported type of serial I/O that you can use right from BASIC is just really handy inherently. And if you want to print from your TI the old-fashioned way with the TI-99 4 Impact printer, for example, well, TI-RS-232 can give you what you need there, too. So, that's 3 PEB cards you're probably going to want to have in your PEB. But there is just one more classic TI first-party PEB card that you'll often see around in the well-stocked PEBs of the TI world, and that is the P-Code card, whose job it is to bring the UCSD-P system to your TI-99. And what the hell's the UCSD-P system, you ask? Well, it's a pretty rich development environment that lets you write and compile Pascal, and it can deliver performance you can't really get out of BASIC on a TI-99. The operating system you're used to seeing on your TI-99 is replaced with something entirely different with the P-Code card enabled. So, as an expansion of the TI-99's capabilities, it's a pretty huge and pretty unique one. The caveat being, the requirements are as steep as they come, making it really the final piece of the puzzle in building the ultimate 1982-era TI expansion system, which is otherwise going to feature a disk controller, at least one disk drive, the 32K memory expansion, and RS-232. Something you might notice about these cards, incidentally, is that they don't all look the same. We've got cards in a beige clamshell that kind of fit the aesthetic of the beige TI-99s we got later on, but we've also got metallic cards that are more a match for the look of the black and silver 99.4 and 4A. The one thing all these first-party PEB cards have in common, though, is that they've all got some kind of clamshell going on. They're not just a bare board. They've got their own cases that let you handle them safely from any angle. And they even give you little wire ears to grab them by when you're pulling them out of the PEB. Bare boards are something we got later from third-party PEB cards, though, like this third-party RS-232 card, which, as you can see, doesn't bother with a case. And that's fine. But still, I'm kind of glad TI's heavy-duty build quality standard shows itself in their own cards. Alright, well, having put together a full-featured original-era PEB, let's actually use the thing. Time to put it to work and take a look at what it's like to work with a PEB as part of your TI setup. The first thing you're going to do when it's time to pull out the PEB is plug it in. And that's going to be with a plain old C13 power cable, like you'd see attached to just about any conventional desktop computer. You can see back there we've also got external access to a fuse in case that needs replacing. With the PEB plugged in, we'll now take the other end of the fire hose and plug that into the TI-99 expansion port. That end has a nice little stand to keep it positioned correctly, but it does stick out quite a ways. So despite the sidecars being gone, we're still hogging quite a bit of desk space here next to the expansion port. Regardless, with everything plugged in, next thing I'll do is switch off the P system, since I don't intend to use that operating system right now. And that is a nice quality of life feature. If you don't want the P system and you want the regular TI operating system, just flip the switch on the P-code card, and it'll pretend it isn't there. No need to remove the card, or the entire PEB for that matter. Anyway, with everything ready, I'm going to press the power button on my PEB. And you can hear the PEB in all its glory pretty much right away, because the PEB is loud. Some folks have taken to dismantling the thing and replacing the fan with something a bit more modern and a bit more civilized. But honestly, I gave up on fighting fan noise long ago. It's one major reason I record all these videos with a sportscasting-style hypercardioid headset mic. My computing space is never not going to have fan noise, and I just accept that and work around it. So with the PEB turned on, next step is to turn on the TI-99 itself. And away we go. PEB first, then console second as far as power-up sequence goes. At this point, we're ready to take advantage of the best TI hardware 1982 had to offer. So to do that, I'll pop in Wizard's Revenge, a great little extended basic RPG. I'll start extended basic. And I'll get some lovely disk noise as it loads. And then I'll get the kind of RPG experience Disk and 32K can deliver in BASIC on the TI-99. Something you'll notice now that we're using the PEB is that it puts on a little light show while in use. Cards are equipped with LEDs and there are windows in each slot so you can see card activity for any component. Necessary? Not really, but it's kind of neat. Backtracking a bit, I started out this whole thing talking about the sidecars the PEB replaced. But one of the most important of those sidecars I haven't mentioned any PEB replacement for, and that is the speech synthesizer. Such an iconic feature of the platform. And yet, TI never bothered to make a PEB speech card to replace it. So, instead, putting speech in the PEB was something third-party hardware manufacturers had to make happen. Which they did, happily. The Core Comp Triple Tech card is one third-party expansion card with a solution, letting you plug your speech synthesizer board right into the card, so it can be used directly inside the PEB. And the Rave 99 speech adapter is another, though in this case, only offering the addition of speech instead of the trio of features the Triple Tech gives us. But most recently, in 2022, Chris Schneider, aka Shift838, has started taking pre-orders for a new SpeechSynth PEB board. So a bit of good news for any 99er looking to go sidecar free and still take advantage of the classic SpeechSynth disk software for the platform. Though admittedly, in the present day, you've got plenty of ways to use file storage even with no PEB at all. So just ditching floppies completely for this kind of purpose is clearly an option. You've got the Nano PEB, which adds RS-232, the 32K memory expansion, and 3 disks, all on an affordable sidecar. And you've got the Tippy, which lets you use a Raspberry Pi as an almost endless source of disk storage for your TI-99. But even back in the day, you had the Core Comp Micro Expansion System as a compact solution for getting all your core features in one little sidecar device. So, putting the features of a PEB in something smaller certainly isn't a new idea. Still, sometimes you just want to pop a floppy into a drive and run some classic software while the roar of the fan serenades you. And sometimes you need the kind of upper body workout that handling a massive 30-pound tank of a computer like this one gives you. For those times, the PEB is still a true classic, and it still looks great in any TI-99 4A setup, with that classic black and silver styling. If you're just starting out on the TI-99 and you don't already have a bunch of disk software, well, probably you don't need a PEB. The sidecar options we've got these days are just too good to pass up. But, on the other hand, if you do have a PEB, you can still have the best of both worlds. Because the Tippy PEB puts the latest and greatest in TI-99 storage on a PEB card. And the SAM's memory expansion saw PEB card production in recent times too. And as I say, more speech cards are being produced even now. So tell me folks, do you have a PEB? And if you do you use it on the regular? Once upon a time, the PEB was what tied together all the best in TI computing tech. Do you feel like it still does that, or have we moved on from the P-Box? As always, I'd be interested to hear your views. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you soon for whatever new adventures in TI computing I stumble into next. This is Pixel Pedant signing off.